Otobong, the tapestry that you're standing in front of is called Double Plot. There's an awful lot more than a double plot going on here from first glance. Can you tell us what inspired this particular scene?
So the textile piece was, I started working on it this year, and there were different things I was interested in, and one of the things I was interested in was really thinking around the notion of manifestation, what we get to see and what is latent. And so what our eye sees is sometimes a bit, it's too late when those events take place, and the tapestry is really working around those ideas. So I decided to work with different layers, and one of the aspects of thinking was different perspectives within the work. So in the textile, there are maybe about 4 different perspectives. So we can imagine the back layer, which is the light glare, is really looking at a solar system. And when we look at stars, we see something that is manifesting now, but it had happened light years before, and it's about 10 million kilometers away from us. And so that what appears is just what we see, but it's taken time for it to reach our eyes. And the second layer would be, we could think about the lines or the borders in the work. And for me, it was interesting to think of lines that are demarcating land, but also the veins that go through the body. But how do those lines affect the people that are living within those landscapes? And what we get to see now is more or less what we get to see over time is more or less the latent effects of dividing, let's say, groups of people, dividing borders, and how that affects the way we negotiate or how we deal with people. And the third layer would be the frontal layer. So the other one's aerial, and the frontal layer is the man that we see here with the tree.
No head.
With no head. And the trees, and then him pulling the other hands, and the fourth layer would be the photographic images that we see. And the photographic images are coming from events that take place, so the explosions or the tear gases that happen. So it's a kind of abstract image, but in a way, those manifestations, or let's say riots or events that take place, show also power structures that are able to manipulate or able to contain or push away people. And so it was really playing with the word manifestations, manifestos, land. So there were many things that came into thought when making the tapestry, yeah.
And it's hard to know at first glance whether it's futuristic or historical, but I guess that fits perfectly with your description. It's all of the...
It's different things, because they're
dimensions at once.
And also really thinking about temporality. So we can imagine a possible future as we can imagine 10 million years ago, as we can imagine being here right now in this space. But the interest around notion of time and also perspective, looking up, looking frontal, looking down on, was also important to think through ways of the double plot itself, yeah.
Right. Is it intended as a standalone piece or always to be accompanied by the sculpture that's behind us?
Well, the way I sometimes make work is that each work can stand on its own, and when put together, they start having an echo, or they start there's a conversation that happens, but they were made both at the same time. And I was thinking about the installation as I was thinking about the textile piece. So for Artes Mundi, it was important that they're both in the space, but they could be shown individually. I think the tapestry can stand on its own as the installation itself, yes.
Can you tell us a bit more about the sculpture?
Well, the sculptural piece, it's very new, but the process that has taken place with making the work has been really thinking about temperatures of places, of bodies, and those temperatures linked to emotions, linked to psychological states, linked to certain tension, anger, love. And the way of thinking of the sculptural piece was to divide it into 7 parts. And so I think the last few years and the way different things have been going on in different parts of the world. We understand and see that there are actually temperatures that are burning, some that are cooling down, some that are in a state of how do you call that? In a state of waiting. Suspended elements and things like that. So I was thinking, how can one translate an emotional place, translate sensations that you feel, but you can't, that are not tangible, into something that is tangible. And so it started from dividing the sculpture into 7 parts. So you have a part that is heating up to a very high temperature, to an element that is levitating, to a part that is condensing and rusting the state of the metal, to a light that is glowing heat to its highest point and then getting dim, to decompression, to another one where the breath is being held, contained within glass, and another one that is going through a slow motion of shift of color, so thermochromic shift from black to silver. And these were really trying to translate that kind of emotional state, like you can watch or be in a place, you think of Syria, what has happened there, or Venezuela and its crisis, and then you think of America, you think of Brexit in England, and then you think of Europe, you think of different parts of Africa and the shift that are constantly happening. And if you put a circle around all the states, you know that you see that they're continuously performing and acting, sometimes decay, decompression, numbness, anxiety, but how would that translate within a piece that is constantly performing those kinds of elements? Yeah.
And being contained within a circle, these elements demonstrate the reciprocity, I suppose, the interaction between
continuously, because we cannot separate what is happening in a specific area to another, and we see that more and more with time. And when we think of trade wars, or we think of tariffs on steel, and then we all of a sudden realize that, oh my God, in this area that they were actually exporting a certain material that was feeding another land. And once that, you start seeing the cracks between the negotiations that have been taking place, then you start understanding how much one place is interconnected with another, and how it starts from one decision, how it starts creating anxieties, how it starts creating tension, or how it could create maybe a certain kind of love because we connect, and how it affects economies, how it affects individual lives. And so it was interesting to think through that, but to manifest that in a way that is a sculptural piece. And the work is called Manifest of Strains.
We talked earlier about the fact that when people come into this room, there's a certain somberness or pensiveness that seems to descend on people, and they whisper. Had you seen this space before you devised this piece for it?
Yeah, I came in February to visit the space, and I was told that I'll be getting the space, so it was quite complicated to think, because the pyramid, or the structure at the top, is a pyramidal form, and at first I was interested in really working with the pyramid, but it seemed very complicated. It became quite complicated to work with that, and so I had to rethink how to work with that element, but at the same time create a space that can be a place of contemplation, that slows you down, that allows you have to observe things and see things. It's not given to you immediately. I think the tapestry does that, but the sculptural piece, some things are very slow. Like the thermochromic, you wouldn't notice that it's actually shifting from black into silver. And the levitating stone, you might have to wait a bit to see it move. There's some elements that are not showing themselves. And that's interesting in thinking about how certain things manifest themselves 100 years later, but the stone was placed earlier on, but nobody would know how it would transform and become what it is at this point in time.
Where is the stone from? What kind of stone is
I
it?
used a pumice stone because for it to levitate, I needed to use a stone that is light. And I got that in Antwerp. So I've been looking for different kinds of stones. I have so many, but to be able to find the right one that could be light enough to levitate, it was the pumice stone. And the sound comes on every 4 minutes. So it's all programmed to have different times of apparition or different times of slowing down, or yeah.
Is this the first time you've worked in a sort of kinetic sculptural way with a piece?
Yeah, well, I would say it's the first time I'm working with a programmed piece, like more digital programmed piece. But the other pieces, for example, or the other piece I would say has that kind of feel would be contained measures of shifting states, where the work, the liquid is dripping onto a hot plate and becoming smoke. And that is really coming from a place of just tuning, it's more analog, tuning the bottle and calculating how long it takes to drip and fall. But here it's totally programmed. So you know that's 4 minutes, or this will be in 52 seconds, yeah.
Not random in the way that these interacting elements might be seen to be in
for anybody that
our
comes
world.
in. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
But capturing people, hopefully, for the time that they're staying in this room.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
You're based in Belgium,
in Belgium,
is that right?
in Antwerp, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And there's a wonderfully global perspective, I feel, in the selections for this year's Artes Mundi
Yes.
shortlist. Do you think this is a reflection of the openness we have to all the voices that perhaps might not have been loudest 5 or 6 years ago, or more of a reflection of the state of our global consciousness, a sense that we're more connected than we previously thought we might have been?
I would say that the voices have always been loud in different places, but it's just who's listening and when do you hear them. And so, I mean, someone like Anna has been loud forever. She's been working for a very long time. It's just that maybe the voices or the ears did not hear it. So it just depends on where the ears start hearing what is happening, and then that is possible to then say, oh wow, we now, they're now talking, but we've been talking forever.
And do you feel it's a special time for art to be recognised for its political content in this award?
I think the award has always been focused on works that have a connection to the political, social dimensions. And we're in a time where people get affected directly by decisions that they haven't necessarily voted for or asked for, where we think about democracy and we are constantly questioning what that democracy is. And we also see that things happening in other places of the world directly affect another place. And the connections we have from moving from one place to another becomes much more closer. And so the world cannot, being in a place here or being in England or being in Europe, or it cannot just think of itself alone, because it's constantly in interaction with other places, either economically or resources or with ideas.
Our attention has expanded.
Yeah, and it has expanded. It's been expanding for centuries, but it's just getting more and more visible. Let's say more and more physical, more visceral, that you can feel it closely. Yeah.
But I suppose the internet, smartphone technology makes us all so much more aware of what's happening in other parts of the world.
Totally.
But I like the way your work kind of distills it into a place and a time. Art is almost more valuable for its ability to do that, to focus our gaze.
Yeah. I think with what is interesting with art is that you don't feel that you have to, that you're allowed, you can choose what you want to focus on and how you can put that out in the world, and you can decide to be an activist, or you could also paint a flower, and that flower could mean a lot and have a lot of symbolism or have a lot of weight. And each element that you're bringing out into the wall makes one focus directly on something and think about it and be part of a space of reflection, of beauty, which is quite complicated, but of contemplation or action in a way, yeah.
But beauty is an interesting point. I find your tapestry very beautiful, and yet what it's saying is also quite disturbing, and the main figure in it has no head. Why does the main figure have no head?
There are many reasons to that. I normally don't, sometimes it comes intuitively that you don't want to focus on the character of the person, you don't want to give it a race, you don't want to give it a place from where it comes from. You might not want to necessarily give it a gender. And I feel like sometimes the head kind of gives too much information. And for me, it's mainly more about the action and the act and the gestures, the performance of the body. And so the heads or faces, I remove them from the work because they kind of define, the nose, like, oh, this nose is like that lip is like that, or the hair is like that. So it's giving too much information. I mean, when I'd want to think of the humans, the body, as an act. So it doesn't matter if you're from here, there, or it's just what are those gestures that we do within the landscape, what we do to the other, how are we thinking about that. So you can find yourself within that without having to say, oh, I can identify with this group of people or not, or this nose, or this lips, or this hair, or So it brings it down to the gesture.
It also makes one more aware of this character as being acted upon as much as acting.
Yes, totally, yeah.
Thank you. It's a great piece of work.